Hey everyone, thanks for being here and checking out the channel. If you like the video, please remember to hit the like button. And if you subscribe, leave a comment below. I reply to every comment personally. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so they had only microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on but no bedding, running water and toilet, and enough dried food to last all 5 for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised, falsely, that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4th day mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were, and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering to the microphones and one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives took the books apart, smeared page after page with their own feces and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice response, "We no longer want to be free." Debate broke out among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened, and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state that any of them were in life. The food rations past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subjects' thighs and chests stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed, while the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the ribcage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber, and alternately begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 soldiers lost their lives, if you count ones that offed themselves in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured, and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of a morphine derivative, and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one doctor. His heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out to the point there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach and just repeating the word "more" over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility, the 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative they had given him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier was holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in his struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were from the force his own muscles had exerted on them. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested, reluctantly, they try the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically impossible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple: keep cutting. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake. All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back into the chamber, awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, a former KGB agent, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was obvious that at this point, all 3 were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all his might. First left, then right, then left again for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flat-lined inexplicably. It looked as if you were repeatedly suffering from brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of a deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flat lines as the one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to a bed as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. "I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you," he screamed at the man strapped to the table. "What are you?" he demanded. "I must know." The subject smiled. "Have you forgotten so easily?" the subject asked. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into a silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out, "So nearly free." After weeks of unexplained murders, the ominous unknown killer is still on the rise. After little evidence has been found, a young boy states that he survived one of the killer's attacks and bravely tells his story. "I had a bad dream and I woke up in the middle of the night," says the boy. "I saw that for some reason the window was open, even though I remember it being closed before I went to bed. I got up and shut it once more. Afterwards, I simply crawled under my covers and tried to get back to sleep. That's when I had a strange feeling like someone was watching me. I looked up and nearly jumped out of my bed. There, in the little ray of light, illuminating from between my curtains, were a pair of 2 eyes. These weren't regular eyes. They were dark, ominous eyes. They were bordered in black and just plain out terrified me. That's when I saw his mouth. A long, horrendous smile that made every hair on my body stand up. The figure stood there, watching me. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he said it. A simple phrase, but said in a way only a madman could speak. He said, "Go to sleep." I let out a scream. That's what sent him at me. He pulled up a knife, aiming at my heart. He jumped on top of my bed. I fought him back. I kicked, I punched, I rolled around, trying to knock him off me. That's when my dad busted in. The man threw the knife. It went into my dad's shoulder. The man probably would have finished him off if one of the neighbors hadn't alerted the police. They drove into the parking lot and ran towards the door. The man turned and ran down the hallway. I heard a smash like glass breaking. As I came out of my room, I saw the window that was pointing towards the back of my house was broken. I looked out to see him vanish into the distance. I can tell you one thing. I will never forget that face. Those cold, evil eyes and that psychotic smile. They will never leave my head. Police are still on the lookout for this man. If you see anyone that fits the description in this story, please contact your local police department. Jeff and his family had just moved into a new neighborhood. His dad had gotten a promotion at work, and they thought it would be best to live in one of those fancy neighborhoods. Jeff and his brother, Liu, couldn't complain though. A new, better house. What was not to love? As they were getting unpacked, one of the neighbors came by. "Hello," she said. "I'm Barbara. I live across the street from you." "Well, I just wanted to introduce myself and to introduce my son." She turns around and calls her son over. "Billy, these are our new neighbors." Billy said hi and ran back to play in his yard. "Well," said Jeff's mom, "I'm Margaret, and this is my husband Peter and my two sons, Jeff and Liu." They each introduced themselves, and then Barbara invited them to her son's birthday. Jeff and his brother were about to object when their mother said that they would love to. When Jeff and his family were done packing, Jeff went up to his mom. "Mom, why would you invite us to some kid's party? If you haven't noticed, I'm not some dumb kid." "Jeff," said his mother, "we just moved here. We should show that we want to spend time with our neighbors. Now we're going to that party, and that's final." Jeff started to talk, but stopped himself, knowing that he couldn't do anything. Whenever his mom said something, it was final. He walked up to his room and plopped down on his bed. He sat there looking at his ceiling when suddenly he got a weird feeling. Not so much pain, but a weird feeling. He dismissed it as just some random feeling. He heard his mother call him down to get his stuff, and he walked down to get it. The next day, Jeff walked downstairs to get breakfast and got ready for school. As he sat there, eating his breakfast, he once again got that feeling. This time, it was stronger. It gave him a slight, tugging pain, but he once again dismissed it. As he and Liu finished breakfast, they walked down to the bus stop. They sat there waiting for the bus, and then all of a sudden, some kid on a skateboard jumped over them, only inches above their laps. They both jumped back in surprise. "Hey, what the hell?" The kid landed and turned back to them. He kicked his skateboard up and caught it with his hands. The kid seemed to be about 12, 1 year younger than Jeff. He wore an Aeropostale shirt and ripped blue jeans. Well, it looks like we got some new meat." Suddenly, 2 other kids appeared. One was super skinny and the other was huge. "Well, since you're new here, I'd like to introduce ourselves. Over there is Keith." Jeff and Liu looked over to the skinny kid. He had a dopey face that you would expect a sidekick to have. "And he's Troy." They looked over at the chubby kid. This kid looked like he hadn't exercised since he was crawling. "And I," said the first kid, "am Randy. Now, for all the kids in this neighborhood, there is a small prize for bus fare, if you catch my drift." Liu stood up, ready to punch the lights out of the kid's eyes when one of his friends pulled a knife on him. "Tss, tss, tss. I had hoped you would be more cooperative, but it seems we must do this the hard way." The kid walked up to Liu and took his wallet out of his pocket. Jeff got that feeling again. Now it was truly strong, a burning sensation. He stood up, but Liu gestured him to sit down. Jeff ignored him and walked up to the kid. "Listen here, you little punk. Give back my bro's wallet or else." Randy put the wallet in his pocket and pulled out his own knife. "Oh, and what will you do?" Just as he finished the sentence, Jeff popped the kid in the nose. As Randy reached for his face, Jeff grabbed the kid's wrist and broke it. Randy screamed and Jeff grabbed the knife from his hand. Troy and Keith rushed Jeff, but Jeff was too quick. He threw Randy to the ground. Keith lashed out at him, but Jeff ducked and stabbed him in the arm. Keith dropped his knife and fell to the ground screaming. Troy rushed him too, but Jeff didn't even need the knife. He just punched Troy straight in the stomach, and Troy went down. As he fell, he puked all over. Liu could do nothing but look in amazement at Jeff. "Jeff, how'd you?" was all he said. They saw the bus coming and knew that they'd be blamed for the whole thing. So they started running as fast as they could. As they ran, they looked back and saw the bus driver rushing over to Randy and the others. As Jeff and Liu made it to the school, they didn't dare tell what happened. All they did was sit and listen. Liu just thought of that as his brother beating up a few kids. But Jeff knew it was more. It was something scary. As he got that feeling, he felt how powerful it was. The urge to just hurt someone. He didn't like how it sounded, but he couldn't help feeling happy. He felt that strange feeling go away and stay away for the entire day of school. Even as he walked home due to the whole thing near the bus stop, and how now he probably wouldn't be taking the bus anymore, he felt happy. When he got home, his parents asked him how his day was, and he said, in a somewhat ominous voice, "Oh, it was a wonderful day." Next morning, he heard a knock at his front door. He walked down to find 2 police officers at the door. His mother looking back at him with an angry look. "Jeff, these officers tell me that you attacked 3 kids, that it wasn't regular fighting, and that they were stabbed. Stabbed, son." Jeff's gaze fell to the floor, showing his mother that it was true. "Mom, they were the ones who pulled the knives on me and Liu." "Son," said one of the cops, "we found 3 kids, 2 stabbed, 1 having a bruise on his stomach, and we have witnesses proving that you fled the scene. Now what does that tell us?" Jeff knew it was no use. He couldn't say he and Liu had been attacked, but then there was no proof it was not them who attacked first. They couldn't say that they weren't fleeing because, truth be told, they were. So Jeff couldn't defend himself or Liu. "Son, call down your brother." Jeff couldn't do it since it was he who beat up all the kids. "Sir, it was me. I was the one who beat up the kids. Liu tried to hold me back, but he couldn't stop me." The cop looked at his partner, and they both nodded. "Well, kid, looks like a year in juvie." "Wait," said Liu. They all looked up to see him holding a knife. The officers pulled their guns and locked them on Liu. "It was me. I beat up those little punks. Have the marks to prove it." He lifted up his sleeves to reveal cuts and bruises, as if he was in a struggle. "Son, just put the knife down," said the officer. Liu held up the knife and dropped it to the ground. He put his hands up, and walked over to the cops. "No, Liu, it was me. I did it." Jeff had tears running down his face. Huh, poor bro. Trying to take the blame for what I did. Well, take me away. The police led Liu out to the patrol car. "Liu, tell them it was me. Tell them. I was the one who beat up those kids." Jeff's mother put her hands on his shoulders. "Jeff, please, you don't have to lie. We know it's Liu, you can stop." Jeff watched helplessly as the cop car sped off with Liu inside. A few minutes later, Jeff's dad pulled into the driveway. Seeing Jeff's face and knowing something was wrong. Son, what is it?" Jeff couldn't answer. His vocal cords were strained from crying. Instead, Jeff's mother walked his father inside to break the bad news to him as Jeff wept in the driveway. After an hour or so, Jeff walked back into the house. Seeing that his parents were both shocked, sad, and disappointed, he couldn't look at them. He couldn't see how they thought of Liu when it was his fault. He just went to sleep, trying to get the whole thing off his mind. 2 days went by with no word from Liu at JDC. No friends to hang out with. Nothing but sadness and guilt. That is, until Saturday, when Jeff was woken up by his mother with a happy, sunshiny face. "Jeff, it's the day," she said as she opened up the curtains and let light flood into his room. "What? What's today?" asked Jeff as he stirred awake. "Why, it's Billy's party." He was now fully awake. "Mom, you're joking, right? You don't expect me to go to some kid's party after?" There was a long pause. "Jeff, we both know what happened. I think this party could be the thing that brightens up the past days. Now get dressed." Jeff's mother walked out of the room and downstairs to get ready herself. He fought himself to get up. He picked out a random shirt and a pair of jeans and walked downstairs. He saw his mother and father all dressed up. His mother in a dress and his father in a suit. He thought, why would they ever wear such fancy clothes to a kid's party? "Son, is that all you're going to wear?" said Jeff's mom. "Better than wearing too much," he said. His mother pushed down the feeling to yell at him and hid it with a smile. "Now, Jeff, we may be overdressed, but this is how you go if you want to make an impression," said his father. Jeff grunted and went back up to his room. "I don't have any fancy clothes," he yelled downstairs. "Just pick out something," called his mother. He looked around in his closet for what he would call fancy. He found a pair of black dress pants he had for special occasions and an undershirt. He couldn't find a shirt to go with it, though. He looked around and found only stripped and patterned shirts, none of which go with dress pants. Finally, he found a white hoodie and put it on. "You're wearing that?" they both said. His mother looked at her watch. "Oh, no time to change. Let's just go," she said as she herded Jeff and his father out the door. They crossed the street over to Barbara and Billy's house. They knocked on the door and it appeared that Barbara, just like his parents, was way overdressed. As they walked inside, all Jeff could see were adults. No kids. "The kids are out in the yard. Jeff, how about you go and meet some of them?" said Barbara. Jeff walked outside to a yard full of kids. They were running around in weird cowboy costumes and shooting each other with plastic guns. He might as well be standing in a Toys R Us. Suddenly, a kid came up to him and handed him a toy gun and hat. "Hey, wanna play?" he said. No kid, I'm way too old for this stuff." The kid looked at him with that weird puppy dog face. "Please?" said the kid. "Fine," said Jeff. He put on the hat and started to pretend to shoot at the kids. At first, he thought it was totally ridiculous, but then he started to actually have fun. It might not have been super cool, but it was the first time he had done something that took his mind off of Leo, so he played with the kids for a while until he heard a noise, a weird, rolling noise. Then it hit him. Randy, Troy, and Keith all jumped over the fence on their skateboards. Jeff dropped the fake gun and ripped off the hat. Randy looked at Jeff with a burning hatred. "Hello, Jeff, is it?" he said. "We have some unfinished business." Jeff saw his bruised nose. "I think we're even. I beat the crap out of you, and you get my brother sent to JDC. Randy got an angry look in his eyes. "Oh no, I don't go for even. I go for winning. You may have kicked our asses that one day, but not today." As he said that, Randy rushed at Jeff. They both fell to the ground. Randy punched Jeff in the nose, and Jeff grabbed him by the ears and headbutted him. Jeff pushed Randy off of him, and both rose to their feet. Kids were screaming and parents were running out of the house. Troy and Keith both pulled guns out of their pockets. "No one interrupts or guts will fly," they said. Randy pulled a knife on Jeff and stabbed into his shoulder. Jeff screamed and fell to his knees. Randy started kicking him in the face. After 3 kicks, Jeff grabbed his foot and twisted it, causing Randy to fall to the ground. Jeff stood up and walked towards the back door. Troy grabbed him. "Need some help?" He picked Jeff up by the back of the collar and threw him through the patio door. As Jeff tried to stand, he was kicked down to the ground. Randy repeatedly started kicking Jeff until he started coughing up blood. "Come on, Jeff, fight me." He picked Jeff up and threw him into the kitchen. Randy saw a bottle of vodka on the counter and smashed the glass over Jeff's head. "Fight!" He throws Jeff back into the living room. "Come on, Jeff, look at me." Jeff glanced up, his face riddled with blood. "I was the one who got your brother sent to JDC. And now you're just gonna sit here and let him rot in there for a whole year. You should be ashamed." Jeff started to get up. "Oh, finally, you stand and fight." Jeff was now on his feet, blood and vodka on his face. Once again, he got that strange feeling, the one which he hadn't felt for a while. "Finally, he's up," says Randy as he runs at Jeff. That's when it happened. Something inside Jeff snapped. His psyche was destroyed. All rational thinking was gone, and all he could do was kill. He grabbed Randy and pile drove him to the ground. He got on top of him and punched him straight in the heart. The punch caused Randy's heart to stop. As Randy gasped for breath, Jeff hammered down on him. Punch after punch, blood gushes from Randy's body until he took one final breath and died. Everyone was looking at Jeff now. The parents, the crying kids, even Troy and Keith, although they easily broke from their gaze and pointed their guns at Jeff. Jeff saw the guns trained on him and ran for the stairs. As he ran, Troy and Keith let out fire on him, each shot missing. Jeff ran up the stairs. He heard Troy and Keith follow up behind. As they let out their final rounds of bullets, Jeff ducked into the bathroom. He grabbed the towel rack and dripped it off the wall. Troy and Keith raced in, knives ready. Troy swung his knife at Jeff, who backed away and banged the towel rack into Troy's face. Troy went down hard, and now all that was left was Keith. He was more agile than Troy, though, and ducked when Jeff swung the towel rack. He dropped the knife and grabbed Jeff by the neck. He pushed him into the wall. A jug of bleach fell down on top of him from the top shelf. It burned both of them, and they both started to scream. Jeff whipped his eyes as best as he could. He pulled back the towel rack and swung it straight into Keith's head. As he lay there, bleeding to death, he let out an ominous smile. "What's so funny?" asked Jeff. Keith pulled out a lighter and switched it on. "What's funny," he said, "is that you're covered in bleach and alcohol." Jeff's eyes widened as Keith threw the lighter at him. As soon as the flame made contact with him, the flames ignited the alcohol in the vodka. While the alcohol burned him, the bleach bleached his skin. Jeff let out a terrible screech as he caught on fire. He tried to roll out the fire, but it was no use. The alcohol had made him a walking inferno. He ran down the hall and fell down the stairs. Everybody started screaming as they saw Jeff, now a man on fire, dropped to the ground nearly dead. The last thing Jeff saw was his mother and the other parents trying to extinguish the flame. That's when he passed out. When Jeff woke, he had a cast wrapped around his face. He couldn't see anything, but he felt a cast on his shoulder and stitches all over his body. He tried to stand up, but he realized that there was some tube in his arm, and when he tried to get up, it fell out, and the nurse rushed in. "I don't think you can get out of bed just yet," she said, as she put him back in his bed and reinserted the tube. Jeff sat there, with no vision, no idea of what his surroundings were. Finally, after hours, he heard his mother. "Honey, are you okay?" she asked. Jeff couldn't answer, though. His face was covered, and he was unable to speak. "Oh, honey, I have great news. After all the witnesses told the police that Randy confessed to trying to attack you, they decided to let Liu go." This made Jeff almost bolt up, stopping halfway, remembering the tube coming out of his arm. "He'll be out by tomorrow, and then you two will be able to be together again." Jeff's mother hugged Jeff and said her goodbyes. The next couple of weeks were those where Jeff was visited by his family. Then came the day where his bandages were to be removed. His family members were all there to see it, what he would look like. As the doctors unwrapped the bandages from Jeff's face, everyone was on the edge of their seats. They waited until the last bandage holding the cover over his face was almost removed. "Let's hope for the best," said the doctor. He quickly pulled the cloth, letting the rest fall from Jeff's face. Jeff's mother screamed at the sight of his face. Liu and Jeff's dad stared, awestruck. What happened to my face?" Jeff said. He rushed out of bed and ran to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror and saw the cause of the distress. His face. It was horrible. His lips were burned to a deep shade of red. His face was turned into a pure white color, and his hair singed from brown to black. He slowly put his hand to his face. It had a sort of leathery feel to it now. He looked back at his family, then back at the mirror. "Jeff," said Leo, "it's not that bad." "Not that bad," said Jeff. "It's perfect." His family was equally surprised. Jeff started laughing uncontrollably. His parents noticed that his left eye and hand were twitching. Jeff, are you okay?" "Okay? I've never felt more happy." "Look at me. This face goes perfectly with me." He couldn't stop laughing. He stroked his face, feeling it, looking at it in the mirror. What caused this? Well, you may recall that when Jeff was fighting Randy, something in his mind, his sanity, snapped. Now he was left as a crazy killing machine, that is. His parents didn't know. "Doctor," said Jeff's mom, "is my son all right? You know, in the head?" "Oh, yes. This behavior is typical for patients that have taken very large amounts of painkillers. If his behavior doesn't change in a few weeks, bring him back here, and we'll give him a psychological test." "Oh, thank you, doctor." Jeff's mother went over to Jeff. "Jeff, sweetie, it's time to go." Jeff looked away from the mirror. His face still formed into a crazy smile. "'Kay, mummy." His mother took him by the shoulder and took him to get his clothes. "This is what came in," said the lady at the desk. Jeff's mom looked down to see the black dress, pants, and white hoodie her son wore. Now they were clean of blood and stitched together. Jeff's mother led him to his room and made him put his clothes on. Then they left, not knowing that this was their final day of life. Later that night, Jeff's mother woke to a sound coming from the bathroom. It sounded as if someone was crying. She slowly walked over to see what it was. When she looked into the bathroom, she saw a horrendous sight. Jeff had taken a knife and carved a smile into his cheeks. "Jeff, what are you doing?" asked his mother. Jeff looked over at his mother. "I couldn't keep smiling, Mummy. It hurt after a while. Now I can smile forever." Jeff's mother noticed his eyes, ringed in black. "Jeff, your eyes." His eyes were seemingly never closing. "I couldn't see my face. I got tired and my eyes started to close. I burnt out the eyelids so I could forever see myself, my new face." Jeff's mother slowly started to back away, seeing that her son was going insane. "What's wrong, Mummy? Aren't I beautiful?" "Yes, son," she said. "Yes, you are. Let me go get Daddy and he can see your face." She ran into the room and shook Jeff's dad from his sleep. "Honey, get the gun. She stopped as she saw Jeff in the doorway holding a knife. "Mummy, you lied." That's the last thing they heard as Jeff rushed them with the knife, gutting both of them. His brother Leo woke up, startled by some noise. He didn't hear anything else, so he just shut his eyes and tried to go back to sleep. As he was on the border of slumber, he got the strangest feeling that someone was watching him. He looked up. Before Jeff's hand covered his mouth, he slowly raised the knife, ready to plunge it into Liu. Liu thrashed here and there, trying to escape Jeff's grip. "Shh," Jeff said. "Just go to sleep." White walls. White, padded walls. Day in, day out. White, padded walls. Let me tell you why I see these white padded walls day in and day out. I am, or at least according to several doctors, certifiably insane. Hallucinations, paranoia, schizophrenia, multiple personality disorders. The list goes on and on. I was a normal working class man, living the American dream. I had a wife and 2 children. My income was high and my debt was low. I had it all. Then, things started to go wrong. They started to go in a direction I couldn't even fathom. My wife and I had always wanted to go to the British Isles, but for the longest time, the money wasn't there. It took 7 years and 2 promotions before we could even begin to think realistically. Anyway, after months of careful planning and preparation, we were on a plane flying over the Atlantic Ocean. Just me and her, no kids, no job, nothing but beautiful scenery and relaxation for 24 straight days. Fast forward a week. Having taken in many of the big cities, we decided to see some of the smaller places, out in the countryside. We packed a small bag of essentials and took a cab into the rural side of England. This is where things started to go wrong. Not the whole world is coming to an end wrong, even though it sure felt like it. Just wrong. We came across an old tailor in a moderately decorated cabin. He said he had been making suits for over 65 years. My interest was piqued. I decided to splurge a little bit and buy one. Nothing beats the craftsmanship of a home-tailored suit. After paying for it and calling for a cab, a picture on a wall caught my eye. It was old, black and white, mid-50s. It was a very tall and very slim suited man, standing on a grassy plain. His face appeared to be smudged out. It was old. I didn't think much of it. Even so, something about this picture was unnerving. It gave an odd vibe. It felt almost menacing. I inquired about the photo, but the old man refused to talk about it. That just added fuel to my mental fire. Days upon days had passed. My wife and I took in every sight, every castle, every grassy knoll we possibly could, but alas, eventually we had to go home. Part of us wanted to stay, but we were exhausted. There was no way we could spend any longer there. Our flight back home was vague, and as we were both asleep most of the time, the drive back home was hazy. We just wanted to relax. As I pulled into the driveway, something was off. Something didn't feel right. I got the same feeling I had when I saw the picture inside the tailor's home. It was a feeling of dread and curiosity. I didn't want to continue, but my mind forced me to. I stepped out of my car, and when I stood onto the concrete, my legs suddenly gave out. I fell to the ground onto my right hand and found myself unable to force myself up. I must be more tired than I thought. My wife helped me up and supported me up to the bedroom. I was going to be asleep for a very long time, or so I thought. That night, I was plagued by nightmares of the suited man on the grassy plain. It wasn't really a bad dream as much as it was his presence haunting me in my subconscious, just standing there, unnaturally tall, unnaturally thin, standing there without a face, without an identity, and no matter how hard I tried, his face never focused. It was as though the picture had come alive in my thoughts, but remained unchanged. This went on until I had been abruptly woken up by the sound of the smashing of a lamp. I raced down 2 flights of stairs leading from the bedroom to the living room, armed only with the brick we used as a doorstop. I slowly crept to where the only lamp in our house used to be. I knelt down to pick up a piece to examine when I felt a slight blow of wind from behind me, like a person running past. I shot up faster than a startled cat. I spun around to see what or who it was. My eyes had still not adjusted, so surrounding me was nothing but darkness. My next thought was to listen. Nothing. Not a single thing. Not even the sound of a house settling. Maybe it was my nightmare or fatigue playing tricks on me. Maybe we had a slight tremor that caused the lamp to winch off the table. Regardless, I was tired and I sorely wanted to get some nightmare-free sleep. It didn't happen. Throughout the rest of the night, the Slender Man was everywhere within my dreams. He was a bit curious though. He only ever seemed to cautiously hide behind trees. Only in the original photo was he completely exposed. Even subconsciously, I wished I hadn't moved next to a forest, knowing he could be lurking, watching me, analyzing me. It didn't take long to force myself awake. 10:46 a.m. I looked to my left. I looked to my right. My wife was calmly sleeping. Lucky her. I dragged myself out of bed and slowly made my way downstairs. I half expected the TV to be blaring with my kids' eye glued to the screen, but then I realized that they were at their grandma's house. They were due back that day. I was going to miss the quiet. It was alright. I missed my kids even more. I continued down the stairs, hoping to get a game of solitaire on the computer, when something made me feel very weak and hollow. The lamp wasn't broken, but it wasn't brand new either. Someone took the pieces and shoddily glued them back together, and the glue wasn't glue. It was black and rubbery, like tar. I would have tasted it for its origin, but that's never a good idea. My wife needed to wake up soon. I was starting to panic. I explained what happened the night before, about the lamp and the nightmares and such. She just rolled her eyes and told me I was on something. Wives. Sometimes I think they do it on purpose. Still feeling uneasy from this morning, I managed to force myself to look out into the forest behind our house. It was very calm, nothing out of the ordinary. It wasn't completely dark, so it didn't look nearly as ominous as it usually did at night. I was badly lamenting this night in particular. Suddenly, I saw a light out of the corner of my eye that caused me to nearly jump out of my skin. It was just the kids getting dropped off. I swear I was thinking too much into this. I couldn't keep my nerves steady half the time. Hours passed. We played with the children. We put them to bed. We relaxed on the couch. My wife was asleep on my chest. I was nodding off. I slowly closed my eyes. It wasn't long before the quiet was broken and my wife and I were woken up. A window broke upstairs. In a panicked flurry, we ran up the stairs as fast as we could. Our eldest son, scared out of his mind, said it came from his brother's room. Without even thinking, I kicked the door in. Only the nightlight in the far corner brought light into the pitch-black room. And there he was. The man from my dreams. The Slender Man, hovering over my son's bed. Having seen him, I acted without even knowing what was going on. Punches were thrown. Long black tendrils whipped all around. The last thing I remember was being held tightly above the ground and thrown against a wall. That's when I blacked out. When I came to, my wife was in tears. I had 3 cracked ribs. My son was gone. The Slender Man had my son, and there was nothing I could do. But I knew he was going to come back, and that was when I would get him. The rest of the day was full of emotion. My wife could hardly stop crying. My other son was in a constant state of shock. I could barely think straight. I did, however, manage to call the police. I told them my son had been abducted by a man in a long black suit. I kept the details of the tendrils to myself in fear they wouldn't believe me. But that was the least of my worries. I needed to figure out when he would return. The police showed up and took each of our statements. They examined my son's room. They did a quick scour of the forest outside. It seemed not a single piece of evidence was found. They had begun to leave when something hanging from a very high-up branch caught their eye. It was a piece of material, black, pinstriped, much like the suit I bought while I was on vacation. I pointed this out to the police, and they inquired to see my suit. I gladly showed them the way. When they opened the closet door, what they found was beyond belief. Wrapped in my now tattered suit was my son, completely drenched in blood. He didn't look conscious. Both myself and the police were shocked and disgusted. That's when I blacked out. When I came to, I was in an unfamiliar place. Gray painted walls, small windows on one of them, one exceptionally bland table. Great. I was in an interrogation room. I sat there alone for the good part of an hour before actual human life entered the room with me. Now, my memory is a bit hazy at this point, so I'll try and sum up the conversation as best as possible. The officer had said, "Your son didn't survive. Deepest sympathies to you and your family. You've not been proven guilty, but evidence leans towards it. A further investigation must be held. You will be brought back home, but you will be under constant supervision," and so on and so forth. I was driven home in the back of a police cruiser. Last time I was there was in high school, when vandalism was the cool thing to do. I was welcomed with open arms from my still sobbing wife and my emotionless son. Going back wasn't easy. Thankfully, we didn't have to stay long. The police explained that we were going to stay at a hotel for a few days. We gathered our things when a picture from our fridge caught my eye. It was a picture my late son drew. When I saw it, my heart nearly stopped. In the cutest crayon drawing you can imagine was my son, standing next to a tall, faceless man in a black suit. I made sure no one was around to see me stuff the picture into my pocket. The hotel was what you would normally expect. Simple wallpaper, 2 thin beds, 1 TV, cheap flowery design on everything else. It would have to do since we were stuck there. We settled in, placing out our stuff and laying down. I, on the other hand, went to the bathroom, the only place I knew was private. I locked the door and took the picture out of my pocket. I scoured the page for clues, but to no avail. All that was there was the crude drawing and his name scribbled into the bottom corner. The thing that unnerved me the most was the fact that the Slender Man had no face, no identity, not a single outstanding feature. It rattled me to the core, but I had enough stress from today. I needed sleep, badly. The night was rough, but I still managed to. Not a single dream with the Slender Man either. Then, a banging came from the door. Being half asleep the whole time, it scared the shit out of me. I turned to my right. 5:14 a.m. Heads were going to roll. I dragged myself out of bed and very slowly opened the door. It was the police officer that drove us here. He had a look of panic on his face. He said my son was missing. Nothing clicked. It took me a minute to wake up and grasp reality again. My son's body was missing, snatched right from the hospital. But this time, I knew where he was. I had to get back to the forest. I had to find the remains of my suit. It was the only way to stop the Slender Man, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I had asked the police officer if he could drive me back to my house, as I had forgotten something. He pondered a moment and obliged. This time I was allowed to sit in the passenger seat. The ride there was quiet. I tried to get some sleep. He didn't start any conversation. When we got there, I was careful to make sure no one else saw me. I entered the house through the front door and quickly escaped out the back and headed for the forest. It was still very dark out, so traversing the heavily wooded area was not easy. The only light that came through was that of the moon, so I walked almost blind, hoping to find some scrap of my suit. It seemed to be impossible until amidst the darkness I saw a scrap of paper. The white of it stood out like a sore thumb. I leaned down to pick it up, and when I turned it around, what I saw completely horrified me. It was another drawing by my son, with both him and the Slender Man, but this one was different. There were 3 other people. A boy the same height as him, an older-looking girl, and another boy as big as the girl. Then it dawned on me. It was us. My family. My son drew us in with the Slender Man. Then I saw a beam of light. It was the police officer. I ran up to him and showed him the picture. I explained that my family was in great danger. All he told me was that there was nothing he could do. He said we should go back to the car and we would go back to the hotel. A million thoughts ran through my head. Should I concede? Should I resist? What I did next is peanuts compared to what was about to unfold. But I didn't know, and looking back, I didn't want to. I gave in to the police officer's request and began to head back to the car. While he had his back towards me, I picked up a fair 6 stone and brought it down upon his head. He staggered a bit and fell to the ground. I took the car keys off him and ran towards the car. It was still dark. I needed to get back to the hotel. I screeched to an immediate halt in the hotel parking lot and ran towards the door where we were staying. I swung open the door to behold the one thing I was trying to prevent. Amidst all the blood that painted the room were 3 bodies making a circle around the Slender Man. He turned and looked at me. His hollow, non-existing eyes stared deep into me. Emotions I had never felt before, emotions without names, filled my brain and body. It was like he was making me feel everything he ever had. And with an outstretched hand, he said only one thing that would be burned into the back of my mind forever. Help me. Sirens came from behind me. I turned around to see the police cruisers pull into the parking lot and watched them go out, using car doors as shields with their guns aimed at me. I raised my hands above my head. I slowly looked behind myself to see the Slender Man fade to nothing, leaving only a tattered suit in a heap on the floor. He killed my family. My life would never be the same, and yet something told me I was never going to see him again. I would never be able to exact revenge, even if I figured out how to. Everything up until the white padded walls isn't exactly clear to me. I've been told that after they saw me at the hotel with my DNA on the suit, I was made the primary culprit. After they arrested me and subjected me to frivolous testing to which they got nothing more than unintelligible noises, I was submitted to this place. The white padded walls. The same white padded walls I see all day, every day. No one will know what happened to me and my family. The emotions that were broadcasted to me caused me to lose my ability of speech. Now, all I can do is write and draw. I write out the emotions that the Slender Man felt. I draw the things he has seen. They are what keep me here. I am a victim of another man's emotion. Sometimes, I feel like I have become him, like we were the same being. That day, I learned something new. We were Slender. Thank you for being here and watching the full video. I hope you enjoyed the story and the narration. If you did, be sure to spook the like button, and if you subscribe to the channel, please comment below. I answer all the comments personally.